today we're going to be doing the reports of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development Spring 2018. I had the pleasure of chairing the meeting that you introduced your reports, and they are very pertinent reports to our committee and also to fisheries. So thank you very much for coming in front of us today with your team. And I'll just introduce your team if I can. We have Sharon Clark, Principal. We have Andrew Hayes, Principal, and Kimberly Leach, Principal. And you've been in front of us many times, and we do appreciate having you back. And of course, Julie Galfand, the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development. And we have you for an hour, and then we have the departments up from 12 to 1. So I'll give the floor to you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here today to discuss our Spring 2018 reports, which were tabled in the House of Commons last Tuesday. And just so that you know, Sharon Clark was the principal on the salmon aquaculture, salmon farming chapter. Andrew Hayes was the principal on the biodiversity chapter. And Kim Leach was the principal on the Sustainable Development Goals, just so that you know which ones they were responsible for. These audits show that the Government of Canada's efforts to achieve sustainable development are still falling short of integrating the economy, society, and the environment. And this is not the first time that I've raised this concern. Avec ces audits du printemps 2010,
in these Spring 2018 audits, we've assessed Canada's readiness to achieve the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We also examined salmon farming and conserving biodiversity. In all three cases, we found examples where the federal government was not integrating the three dimensions of sustainable development. In our first audit, we examined whether Fisheries and Oceans Canada and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency oversaw the salmon farming industry to protect wild fish. This industry creates risks for wild fish, including exposure to diseases, drugs, and pesticides.
Canada does conduct research on these and other risks. We also found that the department determines where salmon farms can be located or expanded and under what conditions farms may operate. However, we found that Fisheries and Oceans Canada had no national standard for nets and other equipment to prevent escapes from fish farms, nor did it adequately enforce compliance with aquaculture regulations. As well, the department had not set limits on the amount of drugs and pesticides that fish farms can use to treat diseases and parasites. This is important because drugs and parasites used in salmon farming can harm wild fish, especially those living on the ocean floor. The department had only completed 1/10 of risk assessments for key known diseases, and it was not addressing new and emerging diseases. Most importantly, we found that the department was not monitoring the health of wild fish. As a result, Fisheries and Oceans Canada had no way of knowing what impact salmon farming has on the health of wild fish.
These findings led us to conclude that Fisheries and Oceans Canada had not managed risks from salmon fishing in a way that protected wild fish. Among our recommendations, we stated that the department should clearly articulate the level of risk to wild fish that it accepts when enabling the aquaculture industry. Moving on now to biodiversity. Our audit examined whether Environment and Climate Change Canada had provided the national leadership required to meet Canada's 2020 biodiversity commitment. In our view, Canada will not meet its commitment. We found that the 5 federal departments and agencies we audited had made uneven progress in their efforts to meet 6 specific biodiversity targets. In addition, Environment and Climate Change Canada had not provided the required national leadership and coordination.
Focused its leadership efforts on attending international meetings on behalf of Canada, creating national committees and coordinating the production of reports. However, the department did not coordinate actions with its federal, provincial, and territorial partners to achieve the 2020 biodiversity targets. Let's turn to our audit, which looked at 7 federal departments and agencies to assess whether the government was prepared to implement the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This audit is Canada's contribution to an effort by auditors generals from around the world to assess their government's preparedness to implement international sustainable development commitments. Canada adopted the 2030 Agenda in 2015 as part of a worldwide effort to achieve the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. These goals call for action in many areas to achieve a sustainable world, including quality education, sustainable cities, economic growth, and biodiversity conservation. 3 years since making this commitment, the government is not prepared to implement the United Nations 2030 Agenda. It does not have a whole-of-government approach, and leadership to implement is split between 5 departments. In my opinion, it's difficult to make progress with 10 hands on the wheel. Nous avons aussi constaté que le gouvernement...
We also found that the government has no communication or engagement strategy to include other levels of government and Canadians. Lastly, it has yet to develop a complete set of national targets. Although data is being collected to measure Canada's performance against the 2030 Agenda's global indicators, we found no system to measure, monitor, and report on progress against national targets once they are defined. Without a clear leader, an implementation plan, and accurate and ongoing measurement and monitoring of results, Canada will not be able to fulfill the commitments it made to its citizens and to the United Nations. Given the risks to sustainable development we identified in these and previous audits, we still have not seen the federal government integrate in a meaningful way the economy, society, and the environment. Madam Chair, that concludes my opening remarks. We would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Questioning from Mr. Aldag.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I appreciate and commend you again for excellent reports that your team has done. And I had a chance to read them over the last few days. I was particularly interested in the salmon farming report, and that's where I'll tend to focus my questions. Coming from British Columbia, salmon and the health of our wild salmon stocks is very important to us. And so I have a couple of questions. And one of them that struck me in the report was this idea of having DFO as the protector of wild salmon stocks, but also it seemed to be the promoter of aquaculture, of fish farming. And it struck me that there may be a potential for conflict in that role. And I'm wondering, I didn't see that clearly come out in the report. You talk about both roles, but did you get into exploring if the DFO is best positioned? Because it seemed that perhaps someone else like CFIA might be better positioned to be the champion for fish farming and let DFO focus on the protection of the wild fish stock. So are you able to provide any comment if that was part of your considerations? Did you explore that aspect of departmental responsibility?
So we did talk a little bit about that. This was mentioned in the Cohen Commission report on this same issue. And the way I would describe it is I think that Fisheries and Oceans Canada is at risk for claims that it prioritizes aquaculture over the protection of wild fish. And let me tell you why I think they're at risk. There was no threshold for action when wild fish stocks decline. So there was, if a wild fish stock goes down, there's no threshold at which the department clicks into gear. There was no validation of industry self-reporting on the use of drugs and pesticides. So the industry provides those reports, but no system to find out if those reports are valid. No system at all. There was no requirement to minimize the development of resistance to drugs and pesticides on the part of industry. and no requirement for them to monitor the ocean floor near or underneath those pens. We found little enforcement of aquaculture regulations, and we also found an area where in the funding of research, long-term funding is given to research that is done with the aquaculture industry and I guess in support of the industry. The research that's done in support of the department regulating and the research they need in order to do their job was only provided with short-term funding. So given that whole picture, we think the department is at risk of being seen to be prioritizing one over the other. In terms of where the government may think about moving, if they did decide to split, that's a government parliament's job to make that decision. There would be, I'm not sure CFIA would be the right place. The places that you could look at or that have been mentioned by other people include Agriculture Canada, because you're farming, Industry Canada, because it's an industry, Natural Resources Canada, because it's a natural resource. So any one of those three I know have been discussed in terms of if you did want to split out the regulator role from the promoter of the industry role. Those are, I don't think CFIA would be the right one personally, but those would be some of the ones that the government could think about.
Okay, and you mentioned the some of the components are being added to the OpenNet pens for disease control and for growth, things like that. And I wondered, I didn't see it in the report, but did you explore at all the idea of closed pens versus open? You know, I was surprised to see that there weren't regulations or national standards for things like OpenNet, but I'd wondered, are there other alternatives that we should be looking at, such as closed net, and any observations on that, if you went in that, or if you did any exploration on that topic?
So that's not something that we actually audited, although we do mention it in our report that in some cases that is happening. Right now, closed pen on land is used to raise the fish to a certain size, and then they're put into the ocean. So that's not something we looked at in our audit. It is something that may be coming down in the future.
The West Coast, that there are some small, I think it's Katera that is often cited, that has done small closed pen inland, and they've had some support by the government for the work that they've done. And so I wondered if that had been looked at within the scope of this, so obviously not. I think that there may be opportunities to explore that down the road.
Context, yeah. So you'll see a little bit in our report, paragraph 1.5 is more about, it's more in the context area as opposed to in our findings area.
Okay, thank you. I also had wondered, I was struck a bit on the differences in Canada. You know, we have some things happening on the West Coast where we have, the salmon really is part of our identity. It's part of the Indigenous culture. It's very very entwined or intertwined with our identity as British Columbians and West Coasters. And there's the yellow card. Anyway, I'd wondered if there was, how consistent the regulations are on the East Coast versus West Coast, or if there is an opportunity to have different regulations for BC versus Atlantic Canada, and if that was part of the exploration.
What I can tell you is that on the West Coast, there are Pacific aquaculture regulations that are specific to the West Coast. There are not such a thing for the East Coast, but the Fisheries Act applies on both coasts. So that's how it works right now.
And does that serve us in protecting?
That would be a question you'd have to ask the minister.
Okay, thank you.
I see in the very beginning, Commissioner, that you have a definition of biological diversity, and it's basically everything that's out there, you know, variety of species, ecosystems, and ecological processes found on Earth. So it's a very broad definition. In terms of species in Canada, what would be the goal of biodiversity conservation? Basically saving every single species in Canada, native species only, native plus introduced species. What should be our priorities?
Unfortunately, I can't tell you what the priorities are. I do know that Canada has set 19 goals. They determined those in 2015. They're in 4 areas: protection of lands and waters, the area of sustainability, information to Canadians, and having Canadians connected to nature. So those are some of the goals that Canada has set out already.
Okay, well, I'm very much an on-the-ground kind of conservationist, and I was struck when you said that, correct me if I'm wrong, that Environment Canada is spending a lot of time in meetings, traveling around the world, and it sounds that is at the expense of actual on-the-ground conservation. Is that a fair comment?
So in terms of on-the-ground conservation, we looked at 6 targets specifically. They will likely reach, they have reached a couple of those targets already. They have an inventory of their protected areas. That's one target that they've reached. Statistics Canada has done some work on the issue of natural capital, so that's another one which they have already reached. One that they are likely to reach on the ground would be, or in the ocean in this case, would be the target to achieve 10% protected areas in the marine zone. They are not likely to reach the 17% on the terrestrial side. As well, we looked at 2 other targets. It doesn't look like they're going to reach the species at risk target. And all of a sudden I'm blanking out on the last target. On agricultural lands would be another one. So that was a target of maintaining or increasing biodiversity on agricultural lands. We don't think they're going to reach that target. And the one on water pollution as well.
I noticed on page 4, when you talked about wetlands, grasslands, and deciduous Carolinian forests, that those plant and animal communities largely exist on the privately owned landscape. So it's quite clear to me that the main biodiversity issues are on privately owned land. In your view, is habitat protection the only tool to conserve biodiversity?
We didn't look at that issue of habitat conservation. Obviously, the theory has it that yes, habitat conservation is one of the ways of protecting biodiversity, but that's not a question that we looked at in our audit.
Interesting. Well, you talk about on page 20 about the capacity of agricultural lands to produce to conserve wildlife. I had an interesting meeting with CropLife Canada. And one thing that's omitted from your report is the contribution of modern intensive agriculture to biodiversity conservation. And the fact that farming is now done on less land than needs to be done. So, for example, if we abandon all modern farm practices such as chemicals and fertilizers, at least in terms of canola, we would have to farm 19 million more acres, or basically 14 million more football fields of land. So modern agriculture is a terrific conservation tool because there's much land that can be left for conservation. The reason I asked the question, and it's a characteristic of modern agriculture that's always overlooked. And when I drive through my own rural constituency, there's still lots of wildlife habitat, and the best land is being farmed even better, producing as much as it ever did, and while reserving the rest of the land for conservation. Interesting. The reason I asked the question about habitat protection, one thing that's always missing in biodiversity conservation is the role of managing for biodiversity, active human management. And I would draw your attention to a very interesting program by the Audubon Society, which is North America's leading bird conservation society. And as you know, Commissioner, grassland birds are very much in trouble. And the Audubon Society started a program called Conservation Ranching. And these regenerative grazing practices are adopted that mimic the past grazing by bison. So, and I could go on, but it seems to me that people in government and organizations and so on always forget the role of people who live on the land. Not only do they have traditional knowledge of fish and wildlife on their land, they know the techniques to conserve them. Could you make a quick comment on the role of local traditional knowledge in farming and ranching in terms of biodiversity conservation?
So what I can say is that we did look at the issue of whether Environment Canada was playing a leadership role in order to achieve the 2020 biodiversity targets. And what we found was that they had defined their role as leader quite narrowly. They had not worked with their provincial, territorial, federal, territorial, and even NGO partners to come up with a plan to achieve the targets.
Okay, before I move to our next questioner, I just want to recognize and welcome MP Dan Elbas. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I see Elizabeth May also with us at the table. Thank you. Ms. Duncan.
I'm sure that Ed would love to pass over his questions to Elizabeth in his absence. Just following on our colleagues' questions on agriculture, I have to share, Madam Commissioner, I'm a little stunned because a program that I worked with Prairie Farmers to save was the Community Pastures Program, which was a remarkable program where there was very little infusion of federal dollars, and it helped small farmers, and it maintained biodiversity. There were a lot of threatened species in these community pastures, including the Gaverlock. In their wisdom, the Conservative government killed the Community Pasture Program, which is now going to go under the plow, and we are going to lose the biodiversity and the access to that program to small farmers. I just wanted to add that. I just wanted to thank you again, as I did when you did your briefing on 2 further important reports. I have to say it's getting discouraging. I'm pleased that you and your team continue to do your hard work and your honest assessment. We had you in very recently, Commissioner, on sustainable development. And of course, we were also as a committee reviewing the bill that the government has put forward to, in theory, strengthen the Sustainable Development Act. They still, in their wisdom, have not brought that bill back, so we have to go on the basis of what the bill provides right now. You've made some recommendations to strengthen, to provide direction, so that in fact, one of your complaints is there's no whole of government approach, either in biodiversity or in sustainable development goals, but we do have the Cabinet Directive. And we do have the Sustainable Development Act as it is. What would you say would be the most critical measures on the basis of your report that this current government needs to take to actually start having credibility on being serious about delivering on their sustainable development goals?
So we are doing an audit right now on the use of the Strategic Environmental Assessment tool. And I'll be reporting that this fall. As you know, we've been looking at that tool over the last 5 years in each department, looking at whether or not the Strategic Environmental Assessment tool has been used when programs go to ministers and when programs go to Cabinet. So we've been doing that 4 or 5 departments at a time over 5 years. This year, right now, that's happening, is we're going to all 26 departments where they have to use it, and we're looking at one slice. How are they using the Strategic Environmental Assessment tool when they go to Cabinet? So we will be able to report to you on progress in the use of that tool in the fall. In terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, as I said, this is an initiative that auditors generals around the world are working on. We expect 80 audits to be done, hopefully by this July, from within the next year anyhow, and hopefully many more will be doing that over the course of a year and a half, because a whole bunch of countries are being trained now on how to do this audit. So the audit is looking at whether or not governments are prepared to implement the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which look like this, if you haven't seen them, right? If you haven't seen them, yeah, the SDGs, I actually forgot my button. So we are looking, all of us around the world are looking at a variety of things. Is there a high level of engagement? And Canada got a checkbox for that. The Prime Minister made a speech at the UN and said clearly that the SDGs apply to Canada. We were then looking for a plan, an overall all of government plan. We did not find that. We did not find the engagement strategy with communities and with other levels of government, and frankly even with the other government departments, because we found 5 government departments were involved. What about the rest? So there are 5 departments that are the lead. It's not like they're doing nothing. They are doing some activities, but in their zones, as opposed to looking globally at whether or not we're ready to implement. On the area of data, we had 3 criteria. Do they have a measurement system, a monitoring system, and a reporting system? And Statistics Canada has found indicators for about 70 of the global indicators, so they have found data, but Canada has yet to set their own national targets, and that's something that Canada has to do. So if you look at the 7 criteria that all the auditors generals from around the world are looking at to see if their governments are ready to implement, Canada sort of ticks the box on about 2 of them. There's still lots for Canada to do. Now, in the last budget, the government announced a Sustainable Development Goal unit and some money, but we did not audit that. So next time we go in, hopefully we'll see that. The last thing I want to say on the Sustainable Development Goals is that our office is looking at these quite seriously. The Auditor General will be looking at all the Sustainable Development Goals and all the work that we do in audit and identifying which areas are high risk. So our office has been SDG'd, if you may. We'll be looking for audits not just from the Commissioner, but from the Auditor General as well that link to the SDGs.
So it'll be important to go after more than one of the 17. The government seems fixated on feminism, not the other 16. But I do have another question for you. Your continued concerns about the failure to deliver on their obligations on biodiversity. What can be done to send the message to the government that they actually have binding legal obligations under endangered species?
I would say we've made some recommendations in our report, and the government needs to implement those recommendations as they have agreed to.
Rogers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to commend you on your report and thank you for the amount of detail that you've included. Just by way of information, I come from a very rural background in Newfoundland and Labrador. Rural communities, of course, saw aquaculture as an opportunity, as an economic development opportunity. Particularly after 1992 with the close of the wild fishery and moratorium that existed ever since for the last 26, 27 years. So aquaculture is being promoted by the province and identified as an opportunity to grow fish to feed the world's masses, to sustain rural communities, create jobs. We have many bays and extensive coastlines that seem to be ideal environment to grow fish in the nets and the pens that they use in Newfoundland and Labrador at the moment. And it seems to me that based on a recent conference I attended, that they've made substantial progress in Newfoundland and Labrador in the aquaculture industry. But as I read your report, of course, and I realize it's national in scope, and you're reviewing the entire, the industry across the country. So do you see any significant differences in the various jurisdictions, say from BC to Newfoundland and Labrador, New Brunswick? Are there one area or the other that you could say they've done it right, or that all of them are challenged and have made some significant improvements, or all of them are challenged and have challenges to meet in order to do this industry properly?
So my mandate only covers the federal government. I'm only allowed to audit the federal government, so I looked at the federal government's role in regulating this industry. In the Atlantic provinces, this industry is regulated for the most part by the provinces. In British Columbia, it is regulated by the federal government. It used to be regulated by the province, and now it's regulated by the federal government. So what I can say is the Auditor General of Nova Scotia did do an audit of aquaculture in their province. It has not, nobody has looked specifically yet at Newfoundland as far as I know.
Yeah, because I was surprised to read in the report that there were no aquaculture enforcement officers in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Sorry?
There were no aquaculture enforcement officers in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I just want to know, would the existence of these enforcement officers dedicated solely to aquaculture improved the regulatory approach to salmon farming. And I guess, is it fair to say that regulations surrounding the drugs and pesticides that were developed with a focus on salmon farming, not on wild populations?
The regulations around drugs and pesticides would be for salmon farming.
Okay.
We found there were no limits to those. It's limits to the amount, timing of drugs and pesticides used in those pens. We found that industry did have to report to DFO on when they used those pesticides and how much, but there was no validation of those reports. But the regulations were aimed at helping prevent diseases in the farmed pens. They were not written for impacts on wild fish. As well, we found that they don't know if the regulations on drugs and pesticides are good enough to prevent impacts on wild fish, and they also haven't looked at they don't know if they need regulations for the cumulative effects of, let's say there's 5 or 6 pens in one area and they're all using drugs and pesticides. They don't know, the department hasn't determined whether they need rules and regulations around the cumulative effects.
Yeah, and I appreciate the comments, and I'm really concerned about some of the things you've identified, because if we are to grow the industry, and if it's a sustainable industry in the future, obviously all these things need to be addressed and identified. One other question I was wondering about was, there was no national standard for nets and other equipment. In your view, why is such a standard important?
The biggest fish escapes in Canada that have occurred in the Atlantic region, not so much in the Pacific region. And the Pacific region is where there are these national standards because they're regulated by DFO. So our recommendation is that DFO talk to their counterparts in the Atlantic region to see if they can't establish and use the standards that are used on the West Coast onto the East Coast. Right now, that is regulated by the province. I could also say that this report, I discussed it with the Ministry of Fisheries and Oceans himself, Minister Leblanc. He was really appreciative of the industry, of our audit. He said that this would help contribute to a good dialogue on the industry and its future. From my perspective, this is the audit that I've found the most number of gaps in any of the audits I've ever done before. I mean, these gaps are big. Nobody is monitoring the health of wild fish. No limits on the use of drugs and pesticides. It's not as if the department is doing no work. They are doing work. They do have conditions of operation. They do research. But the gaps that we found, in my opinion, were quite large.
Very much. That's it. Mr. Sopak?
Ms. Duncan talked about community pastures as if they were all disappearing. It's simply not true. I've got in front of me here the report from the Association of Manitoba Community Pastures. They operate 20 community pastures throughout Manitoba, many in my own constituency. They manage over 350,000 acres of provincial land and provide all kinds of environmental benefits, including water filtration, carbon sequestration, species at risk. So I'd recommend Ms. Duncan do a research first before she makes a vast conclusion that all these pastures will be plowed up, because they certainly will not. The ownership has been transferred to local people who are managing it for conservation, biodiversity, and beef production, and doing it extremely well. Commissioner, have you ever come across any evidence that open net pen aquaculture has directly affected populations of wild salmon?
So we were looking to see whether the department had that information, and what we found was they were not aware of, nobody monitoring the health of wild fish, so therefore the department doesn't really know if the net pen farming is affecting wild salmon stocks. We also found that there was no threshold for action. If there was a decline in a stock, there was no threshold at which point the department would have to take some action.
Aquaculture started in British Columbia in 1986, and in 2010 and 2014, under our watch, I might add, the sockeye salmon runs in the record sockeye salmon runs in the Fraser were record high, especially in 2014. How could that happen when net pen aquaculture had been practiced since 1986?
So I can't make that link. We didn't look at that link in our report. I can tell you that, and this is public information, the state of Alaska and the state of Washington have decided to no longer have open net pen aquaculture. So the only place in North America on the west coast where there will be salmon aquaculture will be off the coast of British Columbia.
But basically, they did it without any definitive evidence on the basis in terms of the effect on wild fish stocks.
Sorry? I apologize.
I just made a statement that they basically did that without any evidence that showed net pen aquaculture can negatively affect fish stocks.
I don't know what basis.
Fair
I do
enough.
know that the department was supposed to complete 10 risk assessments on the key diseases,
Sure.
And they'd only completed 1 out of those 10.
Yeah, just a comment. All the people who want to get rid of net pen aquaculture, they think that the net pens will just go on shore close to where they are now. Well, I guarantee you Prairie Canada will be the prime location for closed containment aquaculture for a whole number of factors, including access to markets. So if net pen aquaculture were closed down, the prairies will certainly benefit. In terms of net pen aquaculture, you talked about the benthic environment. When we did a study on the Fisheries Committee of closed containment aquaculture, it was shown, assuming that they move these pens around, that the benthic organisms recover in about 3 years. Is it your findings that DFO requires the net pens to be moved on a regular basis to allow the benthic ecosystem to recover?
We did not look at that, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah, it seems to me that would be a major factor because it's like crop rotation, for example, or a clear-cut forest being allowed to grow back again. But from our study, it showed that the benthic organisms did come back. On page, getting back to the...
Sorry, Bob.
Yep.
I can tell you that DFO does set conditions for site locations and expansions. They have prohibited new and expanded sites in areas of high salmon migration, so they have done that. They do set conditions to monitor and control diseases and pests. They also do fish health audits and sea lice inspections. So they are doing that work.
Yeah, that's all fine, but the only question that matters is, are wild stocks being affected? That's the only thing that counts. Getting back to your biodiversity report on page 3, look, the species population declines in Canada. First, the source you use, World Wildlife Fund Canada, being an activist group, that is a very suspect source in my view. For example, fish populations decline 20%. Well, that's a broad generalization. I find it ironic that the sturgeon, a species that I've done research on myself in a previous life, is the iconic species that you've used there, yet Fraser River sturgeon populations are estimated to be at 60,000 fish. And in Manitoba, sturgeon populations through terrific conservation work are increasing dramatically. This is such a broad brush table. How can we even consider this to be accurate?
So we indicated in paragraph 3.8 several public reports that have highlighted Canada's biodiversity challenges. So these are reports that are publicly available that we are simply providing you as from a context perspective. They are not one of our findings.
Well, again, it's in your report, and people are going to assume that all fish are down 20%, all reptiles and amphibians down 34%, all big game down 43%. I can tell you that white-tailed deer are out almost at pest proportions in much of Canada. So again, these kinds of generalizations really aren't helpful. Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Bassio.
Thank you, Chair, and as always, a great pleasure to have you here, Commissioner, at the committee. I would like to challenge you on a couple of areas around sustainability and around the SDGs and what our government is doing and some of the challenges that we face as a society around inequality, competitiveness, demographic changes, climate change, including environment biodiversity in these areas, and our government's, focus on, on the inequality front, like how do we address some of these? I think it goes much broader than the focused lens that you've put on here when we talk about a whole of government approach, around equality, the Canada Child Benefit, the increase to the guaranteed income supplement, the tax cut, the Canada Workers Benefit, the massive investments into affordable housing, the applying a gender-based lens to the budgets, investments in childcare, the increases in parental leave. On the competitiveness front, the massive investments into infrastructure and innovation, and the impacts that they have on helping our industry to become more competitive and productive, creating greater economic growth. On the Indigenous front, the ending of drinking water advisories, massive investments into education, once again, affordable housing, healthcare, and in languages as well. On the climate change front and the environment and biodiversity, $1.3 billion invested into the protected spaces, $1.5 billion invested into the Oceans Protection Plan, the price on carbon, the investments in public transit, once again in innovation into green technology, the investments in infrastructure on water and wastewater, and it goes on and on. As you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. A lot of these investments that we've made and policy developments we've made are going to take time to bear fruit. You note that Statistics Canada has developed a data framework to measure results on the 232 global indicators, and they haven't compiled that data yet. You've also pointed out that in Budget 2018 we proposed to provide $49.4 million over 13 years, starting in 18-19, to establish a Sustainable Development Goals unit. Would you not agree that these investments and this whole of government approach, the massive consultation that's gone into with the provinces, Indigenous communities, etc., in all of these different areas, really does point to the direction of us moving in the direction of the Sustainable Development Goals? The plan that will be developed by this new unit, I think, will point to these investments that we're making.
So we have to be really clear here. I was looking to see whether or not the government was was prepared to implement, and we had 7 specific criteria. Was their commitment and responsibility identified? Canada got a tick mark for that. Have they established a governance structure for a whole of government approach to this? Have they done engagement and consultation with Canadians? Have they done the planning? Have they got a measuring system? Monitoring system, and a reporting system. So those are the 7 things we were looking at. Now, we did find, and you'll see it in our report, how 5 of the departments, we identified the 5 leads, that was identified by the government, and we indicated what the 5 departments had done. So many of them had started to match what they were doing to the SDGs. What we're, I guess, looking for, and what auditors generals are looking for, is you've signed on to these. Have you developed targets for the ones that apply to Canada? Have you identified what is high risk to Canada? Have you identified targets for that? Have you got a plan to achieve them in all the areas? What the government has done to date has said, we're doing a feminist assistance policy, that links to SDG X. We're doing climate change, that links to SDG 13. What I guess auditors would look at is, you've signed on to the objectives, look at all of them, look at all the targets, decide which ones will be Canadian targets, and develop a whole of government plan, including working with the provinces and territories and with Canadians in terms of consultation and engagement, in order to come up with to get to the overall the objectives. This is not to say that government is not doing a lot of work that you could link back to this, but it's going from the work you're doing, linking it back, versus starting from the SDGs and deciding how are we going to meet the high-risk areas for Canada.
But as we've discussed in some previous reports as well, you've done that a lot of the data and a lot of the actions that we're taking aren't reflected within the report because and it's the nature of the report. It's not a criticism at all in any way, shape, or form what you're doing. But I guess what I'm trying to get to is that since then, with the new investments that we've made in Budget 2018 and the protected space, it's too early yet to be able to really provide an accurate picture as to what we're doing overall as a government, and that just as with our climate plans in achieving our 2030 goals, it's going to take a number of years before we start to see that come to fruition.
So as auditors, we were looking for that planning framework, right?
Right.
Have you got the engagement? Have you got the resources? Have you done your communication? So as somebody said, this is important, and then have you got your measuring and monitoring system? That's what auditors generals have agreed to do around the world. So this was our contribution to that.
But thank you, Commissioner, as always.
Okay, Mr. Pest.
And Commissioner, thank you for being here. It's good to have you back. You had voluntarily raised the fact that both Washington State and Alaska have effectively phased out salmon farming, open net pen salmon farming. Upon what basis were those decisions made? Do you know?
So that is not something I looked into. I simply just stated a public fact.
Okay, let me then drill down to what's happening in Canada. You've raised some concerns about the monitoring and some of the lack of knowledge that there is within the federal government with respect to the challenges facing salmon farming. Are you suggesting that the science with respect to the declining salmon stocks is not yet complete?
Yeah. So science is never complete, right? I mean, you can always keep studying things. We did find that the government was looking at some of the science on disease and parasite transmission, the effects of drugs and pesticides, and the genetic interactions. So it's not as if they were doing no science. They are doing some science. What we found when we looked at the governance structure around diseases, drugs and pesticides, escapes, and enforcement, we found some significant gaps, which we highlighted in the report.
Okay. Perhaps just for the record, because there are people watching across Canada, perhaps you could highlight what those shortcomings were.
We found several. In terms of monitoring the health of wild fish, at this point, the department had made a commitment to complete 10 risk assessments for the principal farmed fish diseases. They had only completed one out of 10. We also found that between CFIA and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, it was not clear whose roles and responsibilities, whose role and responsibility it was to deal with new and emerging diseases. So there's one issue around known diseases, but what about the new and emerging ones? Not clear which department would be responsible for that. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans did not know if regulations on the use of drugs and pesticides were sufficient to protect the health of wild fish. As I said earlier, there were no limits on the use of drugs and pesticides, and they did not know if they needed regulations to assess the cumulative effects of drugs and pesticides. There were, as I've already said, no threshold for action when wild fish stocks decline, no validation of industry self-reporting on the use of drugs and pesticides, no requirement to minimize the development of resistance to drugs and pesticides, no requirement to monitor the ocean floor. Issues related to enforcement of aquaculture regulations, and we found that discrepancy that I also mentioned around the research. So we made some recommendations to the department that they should articulate the level of risk to wild fish that it is willing to accept when enabling the industry. They've accepted that. They have to complete their risk assessments of the key diseases. They have a plan for that. They have to figure out how to handle new and emerging diseases. That was one of our recommendations. They need to update a program to audit the farmed fish health, which they've agreed to do. They need to publish information on diseases, parasites, drugs, and pesticides, because that information was not being made public en temps opportun in French in a timely way. And we made a recommendation that they start speaking to their counterparts in the Atlantic regions to think about national standards for equipment.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll pass the rest of my time on to my colleague, Mr. Alves.
Just a brief, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for you and your staff for the work you do for Canadians. Just quickly, you've mentioned that there's been some prioritization by DFO in order to do industry research versus doing research that would be more for public value for wild salmon instead. There's been a few references where you've made where they have not necessarily owed up to their obligations under the Act. So my question to you is, do you feel that there is a case of regulatory capture, or is there just an overly cozy relationship right now that prioritizes, or is it just a case of where the economics, where you can do more science with less dollars because there's industry support? I'd just like to get a sense of where the department is on this.
So are you speaking specifically about the issue of research?
Well, I'm speaking specifically in terms of, is there a situation very well documented where a government organization which is supposed to do public work ends up being captured and does work on behalf of an industry rather than acting as a referee? And again, I don't think that that's necessarily the case, but given that I have not done the work that your department has, or your office has, I'd like to hear whether if you think that there is a concern that in the case of Western open net salmon farming, if that is, or fish farming, if that is an issue.
So I'll be as quick as possible. I've already indicated that I think that the department is at risk for claims that it might prioritize the industry over the protection of wild fish, and I've already explained why they are at risk for that. In terms of the research, what I wanted to tell you, or to be very specific, we found that the department provided short-term funding for research that focused on informing policy and management decisions. In contrast, the department provided long-term funding for collaborative research to advance the sustainable aquaculture industry. In our view, the department needs to provide long-term funding for research on the effects of aquaculture activities on wild fish. So that's in paragraph 1.25.
Excellent. Right on the button. Thank you very much. Mr. Fisher, for a short bit of time, we're almost out of time.
Yeah, we have 2 minutes left?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, folks, for being here. Sorry I'm not going to get my full time, but just want to touch a little bit on about what Mr. Bosio said. So, and I'll try to be as short as I can here. So the resources put in budget 2018. So, you know, money for biodiversity, species at risk, recovery initiatives, the $1.3 billion over 5 years. You said we lacked resources. Is that going to jumpstart this process? Is that going to, you know, in the Sustainable Development Goals Unit for monitoring, reporting, that's a step in the right direction of getting to where we need to get so we can start getting towards our targets?
So I can tell you that we'll be auditing the implementation of the use of those funds when after they've been dealt with.
So, and very quickly, Madam Chair, the inventory, the natural capital, and the 10% marine protected areas, those are successes.
Yes.
And how is it you feel that those departments got to those points? Is it?
In the case of Department of Fisheries and Oceans, there was a 5-point plan to get to the 10% of marine protected areas. In the case of the Natural Capital and Statistics Canada, to be honest, they came up with that kind of on their own.
Perfect.
So leadership within the department.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair, for that.
Very much. I want to thank Ms. Gelfand and her team for their excellent work. Thank you very much for your reports and your great answers to the questions. We're now going to bring the departments up for for us to delve in a little deeper. So thanks again. We're going to suspend for a few minutes to bring up the next panel. Okay, we're going to resume the meeting, please. We only have an hour, and we have quite a few in front of us that I know will want to be asking questions of, so I'd like to preserve as much time as I can for questions. And with that in mind, we've asked all of our presenters to keep their comments within 5 minutes. They've been gracious enough to give us their presentation, and so we do have the details in front of us for a longer presentation, I think, but they're being asked to all try to keep within the 5. We'll introduce our guests. We have from, and you're all over the place, so I'll just leave it at introductions, and then you can announce yourselves as we go through the presentations. So with Department of Fisheries and Oceans, we have Philippe Morel, Assistant Deputy Minister, Aquatic Ecosystems. We have Jean-Francois Laroux, Director General, Aquaculture Management, and Wayne Moore, Director General, Strategic and Regulatory Sciences, and you are over here, okay? We have Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Jaspinder Gomal, Executive Director, Acting Chief Veterinary Officer, Animal Health, and welcome. Department of the Environment, we have Hilary Geller, Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy Branch. We have Sue Milburn-Hopwood, and back with us again, Assistant Deputy Minister, Canadian Wildlife Services. We have Basile Van Haver. I don't think I've said that right, but you're gonna fix me. He's the Director General, Domestic and International Biodiversity Policy. From Parks Canada, we have Rob Prosper, Vice President, Protected Areas Establishment and Conservation, and Kevin McNamee, welcome back, Director, Protected Areas Establishment and Conservation. And with Global Affairs Canada, we have Deirdre Kent, Director General, International Assistance Policy, and Liard? No, yeah, you're going to help me there too. Liard Hindle, Deputy Minister, Deputy Director, Development Policy Planning. There's a lot of you in front of us today. We really thank you very much for being here. We look forward to your testimony and then the questions that follow. Who would like to start off? Thank you very much. Mr. Morel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for inviting us today to speak to the CSD report. As you are aware, Fisheries and Ocean Canada was implicated in 2 of the Commissioner's report, the audit on salmon farming and the audit on conserving biodiversity. At DFO, we do welcome the CSD report and their conclusions on how to improve salmon aquaculture governance in Canada and how to advance our work on the conservation of biodiversity. Firstly, I would like to speak to the audit on salmon farming. So aquaculture is an important economic sector in our country, generating close to $2 billion in total of economic activity. In 2016, over 3,000 Canadians were directly employed in aquaculture, mainly in the rural coastal area, including many Indigenous communities. Aquaculture is not only a federal economic priority, but many provinces and territories have also identified the sector as an opportunity to grow. DFO's role is to develop and enforce regulation that supports the sustainable development of the sector. Provinces and industries are better placed to promote the economic growth. DFO also provides science to support decision-making. We operate in a context of close relationship with provinces and territories to support the growth of aquaculture in Canada in a way that respects the environment. The report tells us that we can still improve. As you know, the audit makes 8 recommendations to DFO on managing the risk associated with salmon aquaculture in order to protect wild fish, one of which also implicates the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Overall, the report indicates that while DFO does carry out significant scientific study in salmon aquaculture and has management measures in place to mitigate the associated risk, there is still work to be done. We agree with the recommendations set out in the report and are advancing work to regulate one of the fastest growing industry in the country. En collaboration avec nos partenaires provinciaux.
In cooperation with our provincial partners, we wish to implement a sustainable and responsible agriculture sector. We're moving forward on meeting our Cohen Commission commitment of completing key disease risk assessments by September 2020. All of the risk assessments analyses are planned. We published the first one recently, and we expect to publish 4 more in the near future in collaboration with CFIA. We're also clarifying roles and responsibilities for managing emerging diseases by establishing more formal governance. We're working closely with our partners and stakeholders in aquaculture management to ensure our decisions relating to aquaculture are made transparently, based on the best available science, and clearly communicated to Canadians. We've begun strengthening our science communications. You should be aware that at the beginning of February, Minister Leblanc announced that Canada's Chief Science Advisor, Dr. Mona Niemer, will be leading an independent expert panel to provide advice on the appropriate use and consideration of scientific evidence in decision-making on aquaculture, and the communication of science and decisions to Canadians.
In the interdepartmental science review to inform the development of a risk-based decision model on setting threshold on drugs and pesticides. We are advancing work on to strengthen our aquaculture regulation enforcement capacity by developing additional measures to increase our capacity to respond to aquaculture enforcement incidents. We are examining options to publicly report information collected under the Aquaculture Activity Regulation. In addition, we are collaborating with our counterpart in the province and territories and international colleagues to explore options for national standards on aquaculture equipment by means of feasibility study. The recommendations set up by the Commissioner will help ensure DFO continues to support sustainable aquaculture management. With regard to the audit on conserving biodiversity, like the audit salmon farming, we agree with all recommendations. As the Commissioner pointed out, DFO reached a 10% of marine protected, will reach a 10% protected area by 2020. We are now at 7.75%. And in addition, DFO understands the importance of public reporting, and we will continue to report with 2 public key reporting initiatives, the annual Environmental Sustainable Indicator report and also the report on status of protected area. And yeah, okay.
Are you really close?
I'll just close. Just in closing, I just want to reemphasize the fact that on species at risk on the target 2, we do focus on aquatic species, and we'll continue to address the backlog and move forward also on the new species.
Thank you very much, and I am sorry to keep it short. I know we'll get into some of this with the questions. Just so you know what I'm doing up here, if you have 1 minute left, I start showing the yellow card at 1 minute. The red card means you're out of time. Just wrap it up and end.
I thought it was 2 minutes. That's why.
No, 1 minute.
Stretch it.
There you go. Okay, Mr. Kamal, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon. My name is Jaspinder Komal. I am the Executive Director of Animal Health Directorate and at the CFIA. I'm also the Chief Veterinary Officer. So my remarks will be very brief. I appreciate your invitation to be here today and for giving me the opportunity to speak to a recommendation in the Commissioner's latest report on salmon farming as it pertains to the CFIA. The CESD Spring 2018 report makes 8 recommendations related to managing risks associated with Canadian salmon aquaculture in a manner that protects wild fish. I'll be focusing my comments on the single recommendation that relates to the CFIA. I will address what the CFIA is doing in response in a minute, but for now, let me talk a bit about the CFIA's role. The CFIA is a science-based regulatory agency. Our business stems from a very broad mandate that encompasses food safety, animal health, plant protection, and market access. Préserver la salubrité des aliments et la santé.
Safeguarding food and the health of animals and plants is essential to enhance the health and well-being of Canada's people, environment, and the economy.
wild and farmed aquatic animals in Canada and is responsible for preventing the introduction or spread of aquatic animal diseases or finfish, mollusks, and crustaceans that have the potential to seriously impact aquatic animal health, the Canadian economy, and the international trade. As the report itself points out, the CFIA and Fisheries and Oceans Canada co-deliver the National Aquatic Animal Health Program, with Fisheries and Oceans Canada contribution being that of laboratory expertise. Under the National Aquatic Animal Health Program, the CFIA has the lead role for activities such as monitoring the presence of disease, declaring the official disease status of bodies of water, controlling the movement of aquatic animals between bodies of water of different status, and responding to outbreaks of disease as appropriate. Madam Chair, I'll now address the recommendation. The recommendation made in the CESD report is that the CFI and Fisheries and Oceans Canada should clarify their roles and responsibilities for managing emerging disease risks to mitigate the potential impacts of salmon farming on wild fish. Nous accueillons favorablement le rapport.
We welcome the Commissioner's report on salmon farming and its conclusions on how to improve salmon aquaculture governance in Canada.
Working on these measures. The CFIA and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans are in the process of developing a formal process to evaluate emerging aquatic animal diseases and to decide the roles of the two federal entities with regard to such diseases in order to protect wild fish. Technical staff working at the agency and at the Fisheries and Oceans Canada began engaging this fiscal year in 2018-19 with implementation to take place by April 2019. Thank you. Merci.
Wow, that's excellent. Thank you very much. So I'm just wondering if Ms. Geller or Ms. Milburn-Hopp would like to, how are you going to do it? You first? Okay, thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much to the members of the committee for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Government of Canada on its commitment to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, both at home and abroad. I'd just like to acknowledge my colleague Deirdre Kent, who is the Director General for International Assistance Policy at Global Affairs Canada, and whose group, among other things, is leading the development of Canada's Voluntary National Review Report, which will be going to the UN in July.
As you know, 5 federal departments were identified as leads responsible for preparing to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, including Employment and Social Development Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada, Global Affairs Canada, Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada, and Status of Women Canada.
We appreciate and welcome the Commissioner's interest in the 2030 Agenda and in ensuring that Canada is on track to effectively support all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The Government agrees with all the Commissioner's recommendations, including developing a governance structure, establishing an inclusive engagement strategy, and developing national targets and Sustainable Development Goals specific to Canada. The 5 audited departments are actively working together to respond to all these recommendations. Many government priorities, as the Auditor General noted, such as taking action on climate change, renewing the government's relationship with Indigenous peoples, advancing gender equality, working to ensure a safe, clean, and sustainable environment, already support the 2030 Agenda. Internationally, Canada is contributing to achieving the SDGs through programs such as the new Feminist International Assistance Policy, the Progressive Trade Agenda, and the Second National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. The government is committed to building on these successes and elevating the good practices embedded in these programs to bring together a comprehensive and cohesive approach to the SDGs. One example of this was announced on April the 17th, where the government said that it was taking steps to develop such a national strategy. It launched a voluntary national review web portal to learn about how Canadians are helping to advance the SDGs both at home and abroad. Over the coming months, The government will reach out to Canadians, including Indigenous people, civil society, the private sector, and other levels of government to develop a national strategy that will catalyze action on the SDGs across Canada. We will work with all partners to build awareness among the public and to foster new partnerships and networks to advance the SDGs. We will take steps to ensure all federal departments and agencies integrate the SDGs into their policies and programs. And a robust SDG team will be established to coordinate and to support these efforts. This team will also help to gather data, report, and communicate on progress towards the SDGs. Finally, the government is committed to continuing to work through Statistics Canada with the United Nations and Canadian partners on the global SDG indicator framework to help both Canada and the world measure our progress. In recognizing the complex nature of coordinating the SDGs, as has been mentioned previously, Budget 2018 proposed a significant investment of $49.4 million over 13 years to establish an SDG unit, which will provide overall policy coherence and coordination, and fund monitoring and reporting activities by Statistics Canada. To further facilitate meaningful engagement, the budget also proposed providing just under $60 million over 13 years for programming to support implementing the SDGs. This means developing a national strategy in consultation with all levels of government, Indigenous people, private sector, academia, civil society to catalyze action, build awareness, and foster new partnerships and networks to advance the SDGs. Canada's efforts to implement the agenda will be presented in July at the UN, where we will also put forward our first national review. And with that, let me conclude. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kent, would you like to go next? No? Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm here today with Basil Van Hove, who is the Director General for Biodiversity Policy, also with the Canadian Wildlife Service. And I will focus my remarks on the Commissioner's report on conserving biodiversity. We welcome the Commissioner's recommendations and are taking actions to ensure that they are addressed. The Government of Canada is committed to meeting its international commitments for biodiversity. As you know, biodiversity conservation is a shared responsibility, and achieving Canada's national biodiversity targets requires action and support across all levels of government, Indigenous people, and many others. The 2020 Biodiversity Goals and Targets for Canada were developed following an extensive collaborative process. Our government, working with partners, has already taken actions to make progress on those targets. The Government of Canada is equally committed to fulfilling our obligations under federal wildlife legislation, including the Species at Risk Act. And we are working with provinces, territories, and Indigenous people on the protection and recovery of Canada's species at risk, including caribou, which was mentioned in the report, using robust recovery plans based on best available science and traditional knowledge. The Government of Canada developed a 3-year plan to address the backlog of 149 terrestrial species eligible for listing under the Act. And since February 2017, final listing decisions have been made for 76 of these species, and proposed listing decisions were published for another 13. The Government of Canada has also addressed the backlog of overdue recovery documents for terrestrial species. As of today, 178 of the 192 overdue proposed recovery documents have been completed and posted on the public registry for the species at risk. In February, since the report was completed, we published the action plan on boreal caribou, and yesterday we published a report under Section 63 of the Species at Risk Act on unprotected critical habitat for boreal caribou and the steps that are being taken to protect that critical habitat. We will continue to work with provinces and territories who are the lead for lands under their jurisdiction to ensure the protection of boreal caribou critical habitat and to meaningfully advance protection and recovery measures for this iconic species. This includes ongoing efforts to establish conservation agreements with provinces and territories and to formalize commitments and accelerate actions to protect and recover boreal caribou. We are also working with Parks Canada, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and our provincial and territorial colleagues to protect 17% of terrestrial areas and inland waters and 10% of marine areas by 2020. My colleague from DFO has already spoken about the marine component, and my colleague from Parks Canada will say more about the terrestrial target. Le budget de 2018 proposed d'affecter.
Through budget 2018, it's proposed that 1.3 billion So it is proposed that 1.3 billion be allocated over 5 years to protect Canada's ecosystems, landscapes, and biodiversity. This investment will directly contribute toward reaching our targets for protected areas, protecting and recovering species at risk. The funds allocated in Budget 2018 will allow us to, among other things, increase our efforts to protect species at risk, put in place new recovery measures for priority species, areas at risk, and threats to our environment. Advance implementation of the Species at Risk Act by supporting species assessment, listing, recovery, and action plan activities. Expand national wildlife areas and migratory bird sanctuaries. Improve the management of our protected areas. And establish a coordinated network of conservation areas by working with provincial, territorial, and Indigenous partners.
All partners are engaged in assessing progress against our commitments as part of the 6th National Report to the Convention on Biodiversity, which is due in December 2018. This report will provide important information on the status of biodiversity, and from that, we'll look how to best collectively address the challenges and gaps.
Actually, I know you have much more to share with us. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time. So, Ms. Kent, would you like to take? Yep, you're good? Okay. Mr. Prosper?
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee. Parks Canada welcomes the Commissioner's report and agrees with the recommendations related to Parks Canada. Parks Canada is the federal agency charged by Parliament through the Parks Canada Agency Act with protecting a network of natural and heritage places that include 46 national parks, 171 national historic sites, and 4 national marine conservation areas and 1 national urban park. Our network of protected areas play an important role in helping communities and the ecosystems they depend on to adapt to and mitigate the impacts of climate change by protecting and restoring healthy, resilient ecosystems and contributing to the conservation of species at risk. Under the Species at Risk Act, Parks Canada is responsible for the protection of individual species found in our heritage places. This accounts for approximately 200 species that occur regularly on our lands and waters, and approximately 40% of the species listed under the Act. Parks Canada has now completed all 76 recovery strategies and species management plans for which we were the lead agency, including all 7 progress reports meeting all legal requirements in this regard. Under the Species at Risk Act, an action plan must be prepared following the completion of a recovery strategy, and an action plan outlines the activities required to address threats to improve the species status. Currently, the agency has completed 21 multi-species action plans covering 174 species occurring in our places, and priority recovery actions identified in those plans are implemented through the agency's Conservation Restoration Program that is a rolling fund of $84 million over 5 years. In short, national parks and national marine conservation areas are places that play an important role in species and habitat conservation, encouraging research, protecting traditional lands of important Indigenous people, and inspiring conservation actions beyond their boundaries. These places have an important role to play in the establishment of a network of connected protected and conserved areas, underpinning Canada's international and domestic commitment to protect 17% of its land and fresh water and 10% of its marine areas by 2020. As you know, a target known as Target 1. Based on the most current data, 10.5% of Canada's land and fresh water is protected by federal, provincial, territorial, and Indigenous governments and nonprofit and private sector organizations. Of this, Parks Canada currently protects 3.4% through established national parks. Parks Canada's continued contribution to Target 1, both in terrestrial and marine environment, will be pursued through the expansion of its system of national park and national marine conservation areas, protecting natural areas representative of Canada's landscapes. To date, 30 of 39 terrestrial areas regions are represented, and 5 of 29 marine areas are represented. It is important to stress here that the basis of Parks Canada's terrestrial and marine systems plan is protection of representative natural areas, which is a key qualitative element of the international HE protected area targets of Canada Target 1. On the terrestrial side, Parks Canada is pursuing the establishment of the proposed Thai-Dene National Park Reserve in the Northwest Territories. This park will protect parts of the annual ranges of 3 barren ground caribou herds that range in the region, and will ensure that the cultural connection to this place by Indigenous peoples will be maintained for generations to come. As another example, in October 2017, the governments of Canada and British Columbia, along with the leadership of Okanagan Nations, announced the launch of a tripartite process to establish a national park reserve in South Okanagan. On the marine side, Parks Canada is pursuing the expansion of its national marine conservation area system, including Churchill, Nelson Rivers, James Bay, Southern Strait of Georgia, and Les Îles de Madeleine. In August of 2017, the Government of Canada and Nunavut and the Kikitani Inuit Association signed a historic memorandum of understanding declaring feasible the establishment of a national marine conservation area in Lancaster Sound. Despite all of our efforts, Canada Target 1 will not be achieved by the federal government alone. Over the past 15 months, the Pathway to Canada Target 1 initiative has succeeded in creating a unique alignment of federal, provincial, territorial departments responsible for parks and protected areas, along with 2 national Indigenous organizations. Advice has been received from a national advisory panel, Indigenous Circle of Experts, and a consensus report from this committee. In closing, given the majority of Canada's terrestrial areas is Crown land managed by provinces and territories and subject to the terms of treaties, including comprehensive land claim agreements and legal obligations under Section 35 of the Constitution Act, reaching Target 1 will only be possible if we maintain and broaden the collective momentum established under the Pathway Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to, we only have time for 1 round of questioning. And I'd like to welcome MPs Rosemary Falk and Larry Miller to the committee. And we'll start with Will Amos.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our fine public servants. Appreciate you testifying before us, and too many interesting topics to discuss today. So I'm going to focus on 2. A quick question on the SDGs, and then shifting for the most of my time onto conservation. Last July, I had the privilege of delivering Canada's statement at the high-level political meetings in New York at the on conversations around SDGs. Definitely an eye-opener, and I wonder if you feel the Canadian public is sufficiently aware of the SDGs and understands how they relate to domestic the implementation of domestic policy, because I think one of the biggest challenges for Canada is convincing the public of the relevance of these SDGs. I don't think the average Canadian sees goals established by the UN as being something concrete in their day-to-day life. How can we improve that situation?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to today's committee meeting. As you've highlighted through your question, the engagement of all Canadians, in fact, will be critical to Canada achieving the SDGs, and this is the case for all countries. It is a universal agenda, which means that it's global. It's not just for developing countries, it's also for Canada and Canadians and all levels of government. So in fact, there is room for greater awareness amongst Canadians and at all levels of government. The announcement by the government on April 17th of the plans to develop a national strategy recognizes that we will be developing a national strategy in consultation with the private sector, academia, civil society, and all Canadians. And the new SDG unit will in fact be critical to building that awareness. We put online April 17th a new web portal that is meant to help build that awareness and is asking Canadians to provide their contributions to how they're helping achieve the SDGs.
Thank you for that. I would simply editorialize on the end that I think one of the most important outreach opportunities will be around our municipalities, because they are close to our citizenry. They have that opportunity to connect directly. In my experience, federal government consultations that reach out are sometimes not quite getting to every single small town and city across the country. Shifting to the conservation issue, I want to congratulate our Environment Canada and Parks officials on the successful work they did to convince the Finance Minister to invest in the way that it did in conservation. It's a major achievement. And I want to go very specifically to the issue of how we understand those funds will be dispersed. There are a number of local conservation groups, national conservation groups, and other interested parties who have contacted me asking, how can we engage with the federal government and engage at a regional level to best enable partnerships in the manner that it seems the federal government is heading, so that local conservation initiatives can be supported. In the riding of Pontiac, there are groups very interested in supporting protection of the Forêt Boucher. There are other groups very interested in establishing a regional network of protected areas in collaboration with the provincial government and the Algonquin. How can they best engage in a process around the funds that are now available?
I'll start, perhaps. Perhaps I'll start, and my colleague Sue Milburn-Hopwood could close out. I think. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would say, as you know, the work that has been done on the Pathway to Canada Target 1 over the course of the last 18 months has really focused on reaching the numerical target, but not only the numerical target, it's also looking at making sure the places that are identified to reach that target are effectively managed. And I would say that probably the most transformative element of the pathway process is the connected landscape approach, and that with new tools and with increasing the number of players involved in conservation, taking a landscape connected area approach is going to bring all of these new ideas into play for conservation. On the investment side,
Don't worry about the mic. They're taking care of it over here.
Thank you for the question. And just, we are in the process of actually standing up the Nature Fund that actually is referred to in the budget. So that's a $500 million investment over 5 years that we see will be matched with partnerships from corporate entities, not-for-profits, and federal and provincial governments and philanthropic organizations. So there'll be lots and lots of opportunities, and I just ask you to hold on for a little bit, and we'll be, when we have the details of that fund working out, we will be reaching out. There will be opportunities both on the species side and the protected areas, and a number of different programs of which people can express interest in the funds and partner with the governments in achieving these conservation outcomes.
Thank you. Mr. Sopak.
On something Mr. Amos said, but I'm not going to be quite as polite. I'm getting really tired when civil servants start listing who the groups are talking to, these provincial, territory, Indigenous groups, academics, and so on. Rural communities, natural resource communities, municipalities are never, ever mentioned in those lists, and this simply must stop, because those communities are extremely critical in terms of delivery of conservation, and their efforts and their position and their authority needs to be recognized. Ms. Milburn-Hopwood, when you do a recovery plan under SARA, do you do a socioeconomic analysis in terms of the potential impacts on communities of recovery plans?
The objective of a recovery strategy is actually to determine the needs of the species in terms of what it needs to recover it or to protect it. When we move into the action planning stage, that's when we start looking at which is part of the recovery process. We start looking at the socioeconomics and the numbers of ways of how one might move to protect or recover that species.
Well, given the woodland caribou issue and the amount of land that people are talking about conserving for woodland caribou habitat, which, by the way, will not be effective no matter how much land you do conserve, communities in northern Alberta are absolutely terrified of for the future of their communities, as in terms of the northern goshawk in northern BC. Ironically, the northern goshawk in BC is a subspecies of an extremely abundant bird. So you got some problems with Kosewik in terms of delineating what a species is. Now, more on the good news front, Miss Milburn-Hopwood, I'm a big fan of your SARPAL program, which is the Species at Risk Partnership on Agricultural Lands. It's working very, very successfully. Could you describe that program?
So the SARPAL program is called the Species at Risk Partnership on Agricultural Lands, and it was really a pilot initiative, and we are in the fifth year, 5-year initial funding, but it will be extended. Essentially, it allows us to work with agricultural partners, whether there be ranchers or farmers or other folks, to actually help them figure out what needs to take place on the landscape to actually protect or recover the species. And we've actually had a lot of success in this pilot, and have actually currently agreements with over 46 landowners, conservation agreements, where we work with the agricultural partner to determine what needs to do, and we wrap that up in an agreement, and there is some funding to support that partner. So very successful program, and we look forward to continuing that program.
Yeah, I know. And in fact, in southwestern Manitoba, I've been informed by scientists who've gone down researching there that the species at risk species are primarily only found on land that is ranched a certain way. And as you well know, the Audubon Society has a program called the Conservation Ranching Program. So this leads into the issue of active management for the recovery of endangered species. And I certainly hope, Ms. Milburn-Hopwood, that very successful SARPAL program continues and is expanded. So, Mr. Prosper, regarding national parks, as you know, I live right next to one, Riding Mountain National Park, and I was talking to a staff person there, and there's aspen encroachment in the prairie areas. And as you know, the rough fescue prairie is an important habitat and very much at risk. Do you intend to take the bull by the horns, as it were, and start doing some active vegetation management in a park like Riding Mountain National Park to conserve the rough fescue grasslands, and also to provide more habitat for the very important elk, the Manitoba subspecies?
I don't know that I have the information specific for Riding Mountain, but we do have a very active vegetation management program where we utilize prescribed fire. This is actually the fire season right now in terms of utilizing fire to manage landscapes to favor those types of ecosystems that in the absence of natural fire won't continue. And so we do have a very active program of maintaining grasslands through fire.
Yeah, I strongly support that approach. Perhaps it's the farmer in me, but I think because there's no fires in our national parks anymore to speak of, I think we have to actually step in and do something. So I applaud Parks Canada for that. I'd like to, Dr. Comeau, I'd like to talk to you about CFIA. Now, this is not related to your testimony, but the wildlife groups across Canada are very concerned by CFIA's withdrawal from the chronic wasting disease file in terms of managing this very significant disease that has the potential to decimate wild ungulates, especially deer and elk. Will CFIA be in a position to come back to the CWD file? And if you're not, why have you abandoned that file?
Answer, you got about 5 seconds.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So we moved from managing the program from in one set of way to a different set of way because we were looking at how the management of the program is responding to what we were trying to do. We were trying to eradicate CWD from Canada, and we were not having any success, and we were paying money in compensation. I just want to make sure that the member knows that CFIA's responsibilities for the farmed animals, and we work with other partners to make sure that diseases in the wildlife are taken care of. And depending on where the wildlife is, there's a responsibility of different partners to work on it. And we are trying to work with them to make sure that we are minimizing the impact of CWD in Canada, both on the domestic and the wildlife side.
Thank you very much. Sorry to have to cut that off. Ms. Duncan.
Thank you. I'd like to start by reminding why we've invited all of you, stellar federal officials, to come before us. And it is because of the significant failings identified yet again by the Commissioner for Environment and Sustainable Development on your delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals or to deliver on the international commitments and legal duties to protect biodiversity. Very clear report, long list of failings. One of the strongest ones from the Commissioner is that Department of Environment has failed to provide the necessary leadership across agencies. I would like to have your deputies here because that's who gives you your marching orders. And it is a question that has plagued our country since I started in this work 50 years ago. And my question to the ADMs here is, to what extent is the direction to maintain friendly federal-provincial relations prevailing over your ability to deliver your international commitments and your legislative obligations on threatened species? Anyone can start. We're running out of time.
So your question, just to make sure that I understand the question, is the extent to which we want we will be working with provinces?
No, my question's very clear. To what extent do your marching orders from above that you need to maintain friendly federal-provincial relations, does that prevail over you actually delivering on your responsibilities under Canadian legislation, for example, under the SARA Act?
So the government is very much committed to delivering its responsibilities on the Species at Risk Act. I think you'll see on the boreal caribou, we are rolling out the responsibilities that we have. We are rolling them out. We are working with provinces, but should we need to take further action under the Act, the Minister will be prepared to do that.
Well, I'm glad that you've raised the boreal caribou because that's one of the clear areas, including the mountain caribou, where the federal government is not intervening and meeting either its responsibilities, including in the timeline. And we now have reported that there is 1 or 2 herds of mountain caribou in BC that are essentially extinct. I guess my question rests. The other way I would put the question to you is then, given the responsibilities and commitments to sustainable development and protection of biodiversity and to the rights and interests of Indigenous peoples, particularly treaty rights, why did these agencies not intervene to raise concerns about the transboundary impacts of the Site C dam and to raise concerns about potential impacts to the World Heritage Site?
Madam Chair, on Site C Dam in particular, I don't think either my colleague Sue Milburn-Hopwood or I are sort of in a position to comment, just given the nature of our responsibilities.
General question that is of nature to the
yes,
topic at hand?
absolutely. Yeah.
There is nobody present that can speak to the responsibilities, the protection of the biodiversity in that World Heritage Site? So I guess my question would be, in what circumstance, I will, but in what circumstance would Parks or Wildlife Services or Environment Canada see an obligation, or are you directed that you have an obligation to intervene in reviews of major projects like Site C to at least identify the impacts and potentially address what the mitigation measures might be?
So perhaps I'll start with, as you know, in terms of the mission on Wood Buffalo and the identification of the key challenges to maintaining the universal values of Wood Buffalo under the convention. The response to that is we have a process to respond to that, including a strategic environmental session.
Because the Mikisew called for it.
And an action plan. And there are going to be a wide variety of players related to the response to that, because we're dealing with species, with the Peace Athabasca Delta, with water flows, and so on. And so there are a variety of both federal, provincial, and territorial jurisdictions responsible for some of those areas, as well as our relationship with Indigenous people. So the action plan will spell out how each of those parties play a role in pursuing the action plan, so that that park does not get inscribed as a place in danger.
Thank you very much. Okay, so you're talking about the strategic plan that UNESCO has directed. But my question is, why did none of your federal agencies intervene in the hearings on Site C to identify those before the project was approved?
Madam Chair, that's a question we'll need to get back to the member on in writing.
Thank you very much.
Actually, can you bring it back to so all of us can hear it? So I'll have it at the clerk and then distribute it to the committee.
I'm simply raising that because over and over the commissioner's reports are saying on biodiversity, the government likes to attend international meetings, they form committees and so forth, but she's not seeing on-the-ground action. And one of those on-the-ground actions would be, in the old days, 30 years ago, the federal government would actually hold joint reviews or would appear and provide testimony and research. So, yeah.
Sorry about that. 6 minutes.
Look forward to the response.
Very fast. Okay, thank you. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, folks, for being here. Madam Chair, just to let you know now, I'm going to split my time with Mr. Aldag because we're running out of time. Yeah, sure, thank you. So I guess my question would be for Rob or Kevin or maybe even Hillary, but I think I'll lead toward Rob. We did our report on protected areas, and we realized how difficult it is to hit our targets and our commitments for protected areas. And we hear today, and we hear all the time when we talk to government officials, about partnering with provinces and territories and Indigenous governments. One of the specific recommendations in that report was to partner with municipalities, in addition to provinces and territories and Indigenous governments, to find a way to, utilize those generational opportunities to hit those targets. I'm thinking about, in Halifax, Blue Mountain, Birch Cove Wilderness Area. That's a municipal park. That's again, I call that a generational opportunity to acquire protected areas in the Halifax area that you can access on a city bus. So now I know there's been no ask municipally, but I guess my question to you would be, are we taking that recommendation seriously as a government? Are we looking at moving in that direction, or are we going to be partnering with municipalities in projects like that? I'm not sure who wants to take that.
Thank you very much for the question. With respect to an individual specific place, I probably can't answer that, but one of the areas that the National Advisory Panel and the National Steering Committee looked at was not just large landscapes, but small landscapes, and there was a special working group for municipalities that provided advice to the National Steering Committee on municipalities, and that was driven largely by our experience in the Rouge National Urban Park, which is creating really a stepping stone for a variety of Canadians who otherwise wouldn't be able to get to conserved areas or participate in conservation, to get their feet wet in a place that's accessible from a GO train. And so we recognize that the role that urban and municipalities can play, and we did get some good advice from that municipality working group.
Thank you. Blue Mountain is our Rouge. Blue Mountain Wilderness Area is our Rouge, so I thank you for that answer. I'll pass my time on to Mr. Aldag.
I'd wanted to direct my questions to the Fisheries and Oceans representatives, and in the discussion with the Commissioner, I'd raised the question, and in her response, she'd indicated that with the role that fisheries has in playing this role of overseeing the public interest in protecting our wild fish stocks, particularly salmon on the West Coast, but also having this role for being essentially the champions for aquaculture, there is that risk for criticism. And I wanted to, because we are being televised or broadcast today, give the department an opportunity. Is this something that Canadians should be concerned about, or are you able within the department to fulfill those dual mandates?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. First, I would like to maybe explain a little bit more how we manage aquaculture in fisheries and ocean. So my sector manages the aquaculture program, and what we do is we develop and amend and manage the regulations that manage the aquaculture sector, and the science sector is also providing some science advice on how we implement those regulations, how we do those regulations, how we implement them. It's important to know that our role is not to promote industry. The industry does that themselves, and because it's a shared jurisdiction, provinces are the one making the promotion of the industry. I think one of the member in the previous discussion did mention the role, for example, very aggressive of some provinces. Newfoundland is one, Nova Scotia is another one, of bringing new investment in their region. So our role is to develop and implement regulation that supports the industry. So we have to make sure that our regulation is sustainable for industry and that it supports the growth of the industry.
And we're going to run out of time here, but I also wanted to ask briefly if you can provide a comment. I know that Fisheries and Oceans really was decimated in 2012 with the budget cuts imposed by the Conservatives under the Deficit Reduction Action Plan. I was really pleased to see that although the Commissioner pointed out that there were some deficiencies in research in some key areas, that the department does seem to be finally recovering from that. But I did want to see if you had any comments about, are you actually positioned now to move forward with an aggressive research program on the kind of work that needs to be done to give Canadians the confidence that we will have sustainable fish stocks and healthy populations? And so any comments on that? Because I heard Mr. Sopak make a comment that we've had record Fraser River salmon runs based on their policies, and yet the science programs were decimated. So any comments on where you're at now to carry forward with the research program?
Thank you for the question, and I will share 30 seconds with my colleague Wayne Moore, just to say that the regulation that we have when we manage the pesticide and the drugs in the ocean are done under regulation that are very strict on what's the potential impact, and they're done in a way that we minimize the impact on fish and the habitat, but also it's the cumulative effect that the report bring as an additional one that we will be working on. But Mr. Moore can tell you more about the science we do to protect the wild fish also.
Yeah. So thank you, Madam Chair, for the member's question. highlight a couple of points here. I think the reinvestments that have happened over the last few years have been really important, specifically with Pacific salmon. We hired 29 new scientists in the Pacific region to work on this. We've an extensive set of work that's been done to date on aquaculture and the interaction with wild fish along 6 themes, and that work is all on our website, and people are free to see what work we've done in those areas, including related to cumulative impact of pesticides. So I'll leave it there,
Thank you
Madam
very
Chair.
much. As a chair, I very rarely ever ask a question, but the discussions that have been going on today, I really want to just ask something. I want to amplify the comments that Mr. Sopak and also my colleagues on the other side, on the Liberal side, have mentioned that it is about bringing all partners to the table, and municipalities have a very strong role, and hopefully I'm glad to hear they are at the table. But what I reflected on as I was listening to your comments is conservation authorities in Ontario are big holders of land, conservation land, and you mentioned about the public, having a chance through Rouge to get to see firsthand on conservation, and I have to say there's a lot of that activity going on conservation lands, and I haven't heard conservation lands mentioned at all. Can you tell me where conservation lands, especially in Ontario, are fitting into this work on Target 1?
Sure. So one of the things that we were tasked with by the federal, provincial, and territorial ministers was to look at the accounting of what type of conservation works. And I think what we're coming to the conclusion of is that we need to expand the role and recognition of those areas that contribute to the target. And start working, as I said, the transformative element of the pathway is really a connected network of conserved areas, and those conserved areas will take many, many different forms. It include industry, agriculture, conservation authorities, and so on. And it's going to be this collective that's actually going to make the difference.
Very glad to hear that. Thank you very much to all of you being here today and answering our questions. And I just want to remind the committee, we're back on C69 on Thursday with the Commissioner and the, Minister, my apologies, and the departments. Thank you.